These sitting poses are so important as a foundation to a practice. Not only do they ground you into the practice and allow you to really explore your breath or meditation, but really these are the poses that are going to create the openings and the length and the quality in the legs that you need to practice demanding poses correctly. All right, we're gonna take a look at this pose in 3 different ways, just sitting up with active legs in a forward bend, and then we're gonna take a look at a more restorative aspect of the pose, and we're gonna do it while lying down. So we're going to, first of all, sit down in this pose, and we're going to see where it is that your legs feel the most comfortable here. So perhaps this is your Upavistha today, maybe it's here. This is a great place to start. And as we're able to, we start bringing the leg back a bit. So what we want to look at first is, how is your lower back? Is there a rounding in the lower back? Do you need to add your hands to be able to sit up on this pose? If that's the case, go ahead and use a little bit of height. Use the blanket, the block, or the height like this. And I sit on that height, and then I come into my pose. Go ahead and sit in Upavistha, lift the trunk, take a few breaths. If you added a little bit of height behind you and that feels better on your lower back, you're not having to round that lower back, that's great. We're going to put our left hand here in the center and right hand behind us, and then I'm going to turn the foot out. So it's going to turn, in would be this way. I'm going to turn the toes out, and I'm going to lift the right leg down, and we're going to do the same thing with the left side. Go ahead and lift the left leg, keeping that knee very, very straight. So I don't want to bend the knee, keep the knee straight. The sensation in this pose should be that the heels are pushing out. To do that, I use a belt. If you don't have a belt, that's fine. You can watch and you can maybe imagine the sensation. So the way I place a belt is the little tail end of my buckle. I place on the outside of my leg so that I can tighten, pushing towards me. So I make sure that the buckle doesn't end up here in the inner leg, or like this, so that I have to bend to tighten. So I garland myself. I make sure that it's around my groin here and not my waist. And I put it around my foot, closer to the heel. Okay. Making sure that the buckle isn't touching any part of my skin, I bend the knee a little bit. I pull on my belt, make it tighter, and I use that resistance of the belt and I stretch my leg against that, right? So there's really a lot of tension here. My knees are straight, knees are pointing up towards the ceiling, so are my toes. I release the eyes, the ears, and the throat. I release the belly, and I start receiving length on the inner leg, strength in the leg, and more than anything, when the legs are active and they're working, then the back also lifts. And there you have it, Upavistha Konasana, with the support of the belt, makes this pose more active. A really excellent pose for your health. Go ahead and recreate the feeling of the belt without the belt being there. And that's how you can work on this pose to improve it. All right, for the second variation of Upavistha Konasana, we're going to start folding forward. So here are a few tips to get you to fold forward safely. All right, so you want to gather your props for this. We're going to start folding forward. We're going to have work with blocks or a bolster or a chair. So what we want to think about here is the positioning of your knee and of your feet. So toes will always point up towards the ceiling, knees will always point up towards the ceiling. So I'm never going to have these feet come and roll in. As I come forward, if my feet are coming with me, then I stop and I work here for a while. I really hold the position of my feet, and then I come down so that the hip is moving independent of the leg moving around. Its rotators, improving that rotation, that mobility, lubricating those joints versus the whole unit moving together. Wherever you are here, make sure that you're not straining the inner thigh. So you start moving down on the chair, not by rounding the back, but by really lifting the chest, but just flexibility here of the lower back. and come forward here. Making sure that the skin of the forehead is coming down towards the chin. And work on your chair in this way. And then remember the sensation that you had with the belt around the leg. Push the heels out. And if, as you progress, you can move the chair forward a little and use the head. Just remember, progress is never linear. So there will be some days where you need the chair. Maybe you had the cold or a flu and you need that chair in order to fold forward because the legs are very weak and any little movement could, strain that inner thigh and be very painful. And so just remember, or if a day you're extra fatigued, go for the chair. There are some days where you'll feel so strong and flexible and you can come down almost all the way to the floor, and those days you can use your blocks. So remember that even though you may be progressing and practicing this for a while, maybe you're 6 months out and doing this every week, there will be days where for some reason, maybe something you ate, maybe it's you went on a very long hike and the next day you just need to step back a little bit. So every time you practice Upavistha Konasana, assess where you are at that day and not the memory of the progress that you've been making. Here's another way to practice this folding forward pose in Upavistha. You have your bolster and you can have one or maybe two bolsters stacked up, and you bring the bolster so that it's touching your lower belly here. To untuck your pelvis, so create a little bit of a lower back bend here without bringing your floating ribs forward. Lift the chest, making sure that the feet are pointing up and knees are pointing up. You start coming down onto the bolster, making sure that you're not rounding your back on pushing the heels out, remembering the effect that we had when we used the belt around the heel, pushing those heels out, breathing, making sure that you're breathing into the tightness and breathing out and not holding your breath during this pose. Okay, and then for our last version of this forward bend Upavistha, we're going to use our blocks. So we're going to lay out the blocks here in front of me, stretch out the feet, lift the torso, give yourself a little bit of a lower back untucking of the pelvis, and then come forward. And you can rest your head, making sure that the skin of the forehead comes down towards the chin. And push the heels to the wall, untuck the pelvis here, allow that pelvis to rotate around the head of the femur, and breathe. And then release any tension in the eyes, the ears, the throat. All right, for the last version of Upavistha Konasana that we're going to work on today, we're going to use two belts. So this is the last version that I'll show you. It's also the most restorative way to practice this Upavistha Konasana. We're going to sit next to the wall and lay down here. And then we're going to start turning around carefully, making sure that your sit bones are touching the wall here. I'm going to put them around my feet. Just making sure that the metal buckle is not touching your feet. And it's not important that these two loops here be the same size. If I need more, then I can give myself more, releasing any tension in the eyes, the ears, and the throat, breathing through the nose, softening the belly, and allowing the feet just to hang. Keep the knees fairly straight and just unwind and release and relax, listening to the sound of your breath, making sure that you're not holding the breath. Inhale, soften the eyes. Exhale, release any tension in the belly. And then you would stay here. You can put on a timer, you can put on your favorite song and just really relax. When you're ready to come out, grab the belt and really use that belt to bring the legs together. Don't just bring the legs together using your own muscular strength. When you're done, just bend the knees to the chest. Make sure that you roll to the right so you're not adding any extra pressure on your heart. and come up. And those are the 3 ways that you can work on this amazing pose, Upavistha Konasana. Take a look at the description below where I've linked some useful videos on the hips and on Upavistha Konasana and different ways to work with weights, really improve the restorative quality of the pose. And just watch that stress melt away. Take a look at that video. Might give you some useful hints on how to do that. But they'll all come back to that foundation. You know, can you create that length in the groin so that you can tuck and untuck freely? Can you create the length in your quad and in the inner legs with a sitting pose, and then correctly start creating that mobility, that rotation in the joint, so that when you do practice a standing pose, you need less modifications, less props, and you're able to access that pose and receive all the benefits that it does offer.